Let's face it, the reason you're doing a pitch is probably because you're looking to persuade someone. You might be presenting a go-to-market strategy, building a sales deck, or presenting an idea publicly. All of this involves persuasion. Problem is, persuasion is hard to master, and most of us have few tactics to follow. Fortunately, there are some tried and tested methods that are ridiculously easy to adopt. My name is Phill Agnew, and I'm the host of Nudge Podcast, the UK's #1 marketing podcast, and I study behavioural science and persuasion. Today, I'll cover 4 scientifically backed methods to boost your pitch's persuasion. And who better to showcase these tips than arguably the world's best presenter, Steve Jobs. One of the most effective tactics that Steve Jobs used to boost confidence in Apple's products was to emphasize the amount of effort he put into their development. Take his 1998 keynote. He had been rehired as interim CEO. While he was away, the company started to fail, revenues fell, and profits dwindled. It was vital for Steve to rebuild confidence in Apple. So, he said, "People have been working really hard. You can see a lot of cars in the parking lots on nights and on weekends." By highlighting the countless hours and weekends people dedicated to perfecting Apple devices, he used a psychological principle known as labor illusion. Labor illusion suggests that when people witness the effort and labor put into a task, they tend to value the end product more. This principle has been demonstrated in various contexts, from restaurant goers appreciating their meals more when they see chefs preparing the food, to house buyers valuing properties more when their estate agents spend hours crafting a list of options. So, in your presentation, consider highlighting the extensive research you've done, the hours spent developing your solution, or perhaps the iterations you went through. This will boost your persuasion. Another powerful persuasion tactic that Jobs used was the halo effect, a cognitive bias in which people's positive associations with one thing influence their perception of another thing. For example, if someone admires George Clooney, they are more likely to try the coffee he endorses and might even perceive it as tasting better. I tested the halo effect myself for my podcast Nudge. I gathered 200 people and asked them if they would listen to my podcast. One half of participants saw just my podcast logo. The other half saw my logo next to some very popular podcasts. I wanted to see if merely being in the presence of other popular podcasts would boost the likelihood that people would listen to Nudge. Turns out, people were almost 3 times more likely to listen to Nudge when it was pictured alongside other well-known podcasts. Steve Jobs was well aware of the halo effect and expertly applied it to Apple's marketing, most notably in the hugely impactful award-winning Think Different campaign. By associating Apple with groundbreaking figures like Gandhi, Einstein, John Lennon, and Picasso, Jobs created positive associations between these visionary individuals and the Apple brand. You can use this effect to improve your pitches. Show the big brands who use your products, much-loved influencers endorsing your brand, or your product alongside your target audience's favourite services. Now let's get on to the persuasion tip that I think is most effective during pitches. It's called anchoring. Anchoring is the idea that we are heavily influenced by the initial piece of information we see. Imagine you look at a menu at a restaurant. If you see that most bottles of wine are priced at $40, you will think that a $30 bottle of wine looks like a good deal. However, if most of the bottles of wine are priced at $20 a bottle, then a $30 bottle of wine seems overpriced. We are anchored by the information presented around the offer, and it changes our perception and our decisions. Few knew this better than Steve Jobs. When launching in 2001, the iPod was 2 times more expensive than traditional MP3 players. Usually, this would kill a new product. No one can charge 2 times more and expect to capture more than 50% of market share. But Steve did, because he set a new anchor. The anchor was the device's price per song. He didn't say the iPod is $250 more expensive than competitors. He said it was 60% cheaper per song. When pitching your product, find relevant anchors to frame it. For example, when displaying your price, Show a premium option that makes the standard option seem like better value. Or use tangible examples to showcase the cost savings your product will make. Rather than saying we'll save you 3 hours a week, say we'll save you enough time for a 1-week annual holiday. Now, those of you who are familiar with Steve's keynotes will know I am missing one more thing. Literally, one more thing. That's how Steve always ended his keynotes, holding back one final exciting feature or benefit and saving it till the end. But what was it about these one more thing endings? Why did Steve insist on them? Well, it's down to the recency bias. The recency bias is a psychological principle that shows how we favor and remember recent events over historical ones. If you give study participants a list of things to remember, they are more likely to remember whatever is last on that list. We have a strong preference for whatever comes last. It's why a lawyer spends most of her time preparing her closing argument, and it's why good TV shows always leave you with a cliffhanger. How things end drastically changes our perception. So, when you finish your pitch, be sure to end with an impactful statement. Use your strongest argument or insight to conclude the presentation. And prioritize recapping. Reinforce the key points when closing. That'll ensure better recall. To craft persuasive presentations, try to apply these 4 tips: labor illusion, halo effect, anchoring, and the recency bias. If they worked for Steve Jobs, they'll probably work for you.